Your son, he's gone. He was weak and foolish, like his father. So I destroyed him.
I know you wish things were different. I wish things were different.
Ellie!
But they ain't.
Please stop!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Weak and Foolish Movie Podcast. My name is Mike Tang, and with me is
Job Ang.
In this episode, we will be discussing The Last of Us Part 2, a video game on the PlayStation 4 that was released just last month. Now, you might be wondering why we're talking about a video game on a movie podcast. Some of you listening might not be gamers and might not be familiar with video games outside of maybe your childhood experiences with the original Nintendo or the Sega Genesis. Well, long story short, video games have come a very long way in terms of storytelling. Ever since the PlayStation generation, stories in video games, they've evolved to become more and more cinematic, not just in their presentation, but also in their quality as well. Think of video game storytelling as having the epicness of a movie, or the death of characters in TV shows, and the detailed world building of books, while also having another layer of interactivity and agency through gameplay. So video games, they're not like what they were in the 1990s, right? They've come a long way. They're matching the qualities of books, TV, and movies in terms of storytelling. The Last of Us came out on the PlayStation 3 back in 2013. And that game set new benchmarks for storytelling in video games. It was so good to the point that it matched the breadth and depth of character development and story that we see on TV or on the big screen. Everything from the dialogue to the performances from the actors to how gameplay immersed you in the story, all of that was so special about The Last of Us, and it really touched a chord amongst gamers. So it's been 7 years since The Last of Us, and so the anticipation for Part 2 has been sky high. I was definitely counting the days for this game to come out. It was kind of like waiting for this Force Awakens to come out. That was like the level of my anticipation for this game. Last of Us Part 1 was one of my favorite games of all time. And Job, I'm so excited to be discussing this with you because you played The Last of Us, and we had talked about that game before. And while you don't have a PlayStation 4, you were actually able to watch the playthrough on YouTube. And I think that's something that's going to be interesting about our discussion because you're going to get two takes on this game from two different experiences of the story. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm really curious, Job, to see how your experience of this story was when that element of gameplay wasn't there. You didn't have that in your experience of the story, but you still were able to see everything. For those of you tuning in for the first time, each of our podcast episodes begins with a non-spoiler section where we describe our thoughts without revealing any specific plot details. This section is then followed by a spoiler discussion where we delve into all aspects of the story. So just a heads up, we will be spoiling everything in The Last of Us Part 1, the first game. So please don't listen if you haven't played that game or watch the playthrough. There's plenty of great playthrough videos on YouTube that you can watch to get caught up. So we beg you to check that out. It is a stunning achievement in the video game medium. Okay, so without further ado, Job, tell us your non-spoiler thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2.
Yeah, wow, what a great opening statement, Mike. Good job.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Last of Us, the first game, is one of the all-time greatest video game stories. Certainly one of the greatest I've ever played. And I haven't played a whole lot of modern era video games, but I have played some, and this really stands out as one of the greatest. It also, on its own right, is a truly remarkable cinematic, dramatic film of a video game. So going into Last of Us 2, or Part 2, I was thinking, how in the zombie living heck are they going to top this? How are they going to surpass the grandeur and the splendor of part 1? And while I'm still not quite sure if I'm ready to call part 2 better than part 1, I think that the creators of this game, including Neil Druckmann and company, they really brought it. They took risks, they took huge swings and challenged us with some of our favorite characters who came back, challenged our expectations, and did unique things that you can only do really with a video game format, to tell the story and to make it personal to us. And they did it in such bold and amazing ways. For those of you who don't know, obviously these are zombie stories. So with that will come the gore and the blood and the slashing and the shooting and all the things you could hope for in a zombie type of story. And there are moments in this game where I found myself physically disturbed. I don't know about you, Mike, but there were a few times I was just kind of like feeling my dinner coming up a little bit. It comes with the territory, though, of course, and it really just gets under your skin. I think that's one of the big points of part 2 that is even more effective than part 1. Even though part 1's really great, I felt part 2 sinking into my body a little more than the last one. Also, to bring up some points, personally, I do think that this game was a little too long. There were some parts that felt like a slog, and I will say, just like Mike said, I was watching playthroughs, so the experience of it's a little different when I'm watching someone play through a part and just getting through, finding the right clues or whatever it is, video game stuff. Watching it as a story, I did feel like it was dragging a little too long. I don't know if that felt the same way for you, Mike, as you played the game.
Yeah, it's funny that you should mention that. I did feel that, like, there's one point when I was playing it, and I felt, dang, this game is long. Like, it was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. It's probably like 10 to 15 hours longer than the original game. Mm-hmm. And but my experience, and I was definitely feeling fatigue at some points, but I did cram the entire game into like 3 days. I have. It was really unhealthy. I was playing into like the wee hours of the night just because I wanted to get through the story, and I just wanted everything in my brain. I wanted to know what happened.
Right.
So I did feel fatigue, but I don't know if you were to, maybe if we were to spread it out, or maybe if you were to play the game, maybe, and not just cram it into one weekend like me. I wonder if maybe that experience would be a little bit different. I think maybe. Yeah. Maybe there are some reasons why it does feel long, but we don't want to spoil anything, so we can get into that in the spoiler section.
Yeah, let's do it. But all in all, I would say it's quite a story. I would say if it's not a masterpiece, it's just short of it in terms of just great storytelling. And for those of our friends who are a little sensitive, there are graphic nude scenes in the game, so keep that in mind. But besides that, it's really quite a stunning movie / video game.
Yeah, definitely. Before I give my thoughts, I think we should mention that back in April or May, the plot of the game was actually leaked online by a disgruntled Naughty Dog employee. Naughty Dog is the name of the company that made Last of Us. So unfortunately, people read the leaks. They were outraged. I have some friends who read it, and they told me the game was absolutely terrible. And a lot of these people declared that they weren't going to play the game because they read the plot points, and they were so angry and outraged over this. So thankfully, none of them told me what happened, but I was a little bit cautious going into the game. I was obviously very hyped, but I was trying to hold back my excitement because I didn't want to be crushed by disappointment, even though I didn't know what it was that they were so angry over. I'm so pleased and so relieved to say that this game is a masterpiece in every way. this is a sequel, like you said, Joe. Like, I'm going to agree with a lot of your points. This is a sequel that doesn't settle. It doesn't try to replicate the original. In every way, it tries to outdo the original. And they swung big and they swung hard. There may be some similarities to the original game, but overall, it doesn't feel formulaic. It feels like more of a natural evolution of what they established in the first game. This is also a sequel that doesn't play it safe. Like you said, it takes huge risks. It makes very bold choices. And I think some of these decisions anger people who still played the game. And I think that's fair. But it's fair because they actually played through the entire thing. And, I think that's okay for them to disagree with the choices. That's fine. But I think for the people who judged the game before they actually played it, like, they missed out big time, because there's so much in here that you can't possibly comprehend and understand and feel if you didn't just go experience it this way. At the very least, just watch a playthrough. You don't have to buy the game. Just watch the playthrough to experience it. For me, I can't say that I enjoyed the decisions they made at first. So, I can sympathize with people who were angry at first. But, the more I played, the more I understood what they were going for. And then I went along for the ride, and, it was extremely satisfying in the end. I think the game has a profound message. It's deeply felt, and it's so relevant to our times today. And unfortunately, I'm not gonna go into it right now. But stay tuned for the spoiler section. But I think the message of this game, it can't be accomplished in this way in any other medium, because it takes advantage of the fact that the gamer has control, and it forces you into situations that are incredibly uncomfortable and terrifying, right? So that's something that's unique to video games that you can't replicate in any other form. It's emotionally resonant. I felt joy, sadness, I felt rage and anger and terror. All the different emotional notes are hit by this story in this game. And I don't want to get into too many details about the gameplay, since this is a movie podcast, but I just want to say how they've made the gameplay feel so much more visceral this time. The way you sneak around and take out the enemies, and how you have to survive, it makes you feel so immersed in the character's journey. Even the musical score feels more pulsating this time. You feel like you're in a modern action film. There's really nothing like it. And another side note, you meant, I love the representation in this game. There are LGBT characters. There are also characters from every ethnicity. The one that stood out most to me was the amount of Asians in the game.
Yeah.
We have several main characters who are of Asian descent. We have Jesse, we have Lev and Yara, and there are a ton of Asian henchmen that you kill in this game. I've rarely seen so many Asians in a video game, so that was kind of cool. Not even I just played Final Fantasy VII Remake, and there's less Asians in that game than in this game. So it's awesome to see, and to feel represented, especially in a video game. I secretly wished one of the Asian characters, Jesse and Ellie, I secretly wish they would have hooked up, but and that would have been a huge win for all the Asian dudes out there. But that didn't happen. So
we'll have to wait.
Yeah,
for our win. Yeah.
All right. So, do you have any other thoughts, non-spoiler thoughts, before we move on to spoilers?
No, I agree with you, Mike, in that I felt a pang of pride when Jesse first steps onto the screen. I'm like, oh yeah, like an Asian guy. I even texted you, I think. I was like, Asian brother. Yeah.
We didn't refer to him as Jesse when we would text about the game. We were just like, oh, our Asian brother.
I called him Texan Asian, 'cause
yeah,
he had
right.
Texas accent or something.
He had no, you said he had a Jersey and a Texan accent. He would like fluctuate right between the two.
Yeah. Maybe his backstory was he once lived in Jersey or something. I don't know. So
yeah, maybe he's from New Jersey, but because he's been hanging out with Tommy and Joel so much, he started, taking on their accent.
I think that's what it was. Yeah.
All right, man.
Sounds good.
So Yeah, so if you're listening to this and you haven't played the game, we highly recommend you just watch a playthrough, watch a game movie or something. There's a ton of those on YouTube. We can link some in the notes underneath the video. So please check it out. We're going to start going to spoilers from this point on.
No, you're still holding on! Let go!
All right, so let's get the big elephant out of the room. Joel. Main character from the first game is killed in the first 2 hours of the game. How did you react to this?
I was stunned. I was like, there's no way they're gonna kill off the guy that we played as in part 1, right? There's no way they're gonna do this. I thought, okay, all right, because it's a cutscene. You don't really get to play this scene when he gets killed by the wolves, which are the enemy group basically in this story. And yeah, I was like, okay, how is he gonna get out of this? There's gotta be something. Maybe someone comes and saves him. Someone jumps in through the window and wipes them all out, and then we move on to some other villain of the story. And then, nope, that's not what happened. He got killed.
Yeah,
in
man.
brutal fashion. We saw basically all of it happen.
Yeah, I was so shocked and devastated. You know, I was wrecked. I was shaking when I was watching it, and you know, it sucks because it's a game and you have control, right? But you could not stop this from happening, and we have to watch Joel have his freaking head bashed in with a golf club at the hands of Abby. You know, it's very seldom. It's very seldom that we see our heroes die like this. You know, it kind of reminded me of Batman getting beaten and paralyzed by Bane in Dark Knight Rises, but I think it's even worse here because he's getting brutally tortured and then murdered. It's painful and you want to look away. You know, I've hesitated on playing the game again because I didn't want to go through this scene because I just didn't want to watch it. Well, one interesting thing, I guess, that came out of that scene was also we found out his last name. In the first game, there were no one, we didn't know any of their last names, and we found out his last name is Miller, Joel Miller.
Big revelation. Revelation.
The aftermath of this event, okay, has Ellie going into Joel's house. What did you think about this part? Because I think this is something that's unique to games, right? Like in a movie, you have to just watch this happen, but in the game, you have control over Ellie, and you're exploring his house, and you're looking everywhere. You're looking at the paintings on his wall. You're looking at what kind of hobbies he was taking up before his death. What did you think? Did it have any kind of impact on you watching this?
Definitely. I had just watched a playthrough of the first one before seeing this, so all the memories were fresh in my mind. So like I had just been Joel for like 10 hours, you know, or however long the previous game was, and I had been with Ellie, and yeah, seeing the mementos, seeing what came of our hero Joel, you know, like he kind of was able to live a life, settle down, have a house, have a coffee machine for himself in this post-apocalyptic world. There was a level of peace, and it kind of was a great way for us to let go slowly. So as brutal as this game is, it does a great job of letting us down gently after that, because it knows we'd just been essentially traumatized, you know. And this was kind of a sweet way to let us down a little, and for us to remember, and also to get into the headspace of Ellie and see why she would be motivated to, well, do what she does later in the game, because this guy basically became her father, and you know, for better and for worse. So I thought that was a really sweet part of the game.
Yeah, I think some items in his house that kind of stood out to me was the picture frames in his bedroom. He has two picture frames. One is of Joel and Sarah from the first game, and then right next to it is another picture of Joel and Ellie. And I thought that was just looking at it and picking it up and seeing it. A part of me died, man. Like,
Yeah.
the fact that he lost Sarah and now Ellie lost Joel, it's devastating. And another, I don't know if this showed up in the playthrough, but you have the option of you can walk into Joel's closet and you see his jacket, his iconic brown jacket. And Ellie basically, you can pick up the jacket and actually smell it, and she smells the jacket like she misses him. She misses his scent even. That to me was really sad. It's like when someone leaves, this world, like they leave behind all this, all their stuff, all the things that kind of define who they were, and Ellie just misses him to death, And I think another thing I should mention is that at the very beginning of the game, he's trying to. This is like right after the first game or something. He teaches Ellie how to play guitar, and he plays to her. He finally plays to her a song, and it's the song "Future Days" from Pearl Jam. And the lyrics, I mean, I've thought about the lyrics so much, but the lyrics goes, if I were to ever lose you, I'd surely lose myself. And dude, cuts to the heart, man. Like when I first saw him play that song to Ellie, especially, you just finished watching the playthrough. I just finished playing the first game, replaying the first game to prepare for this. Man, it's like it felt like a culmination of their relationship. They went from strangers, even like not liking each other, to becoming father and daughter. That was just such a sweet, tender moment. And now it's so tragic because like Joel's not the one who lost Ellie, but Ellie loses Joel. And I really, really felt that loss in these characters.
Wow, you're breaking my heart all over again.
I mean, pretty much everyone playing this game at this point is thinking the same thing. Okay, so they have to justify Joel's death. It has to make sense in the context of the story. Why kill one of the main characters in the first game, right? A beloved character. Why kill him? So we got to know why, and it has to be justified. So at this point, I'm like, what a freaking bold move. I did not see that coming. Even though the leaks, people were like outraged. I didn't know that this is what they were outraged about. I didn't know that this is something that was going to happen. So but also at this point, the focus of the game is now clear. This is now a revenge story. Right. And in my opinion, it's unlike any revenge story I've ever seen. Maybe an exception is Game of Thrones, but I think even then, vengeance is the centerpiece of this story in The Last of Us, whereas in Game of Thrones, vengeance was a side plot. I think in nearly all revenge stories, revenge movies or shows, the protagonist is avenging someone who you as an audience member aren't that emotionally attached to. But here, one of the main characters is killed, and it's someone that you played as in the first game, that you were invested in for like 15 plus hours. For me, man, there's so much hatred building up inside for this revenge quest. Like, I was on board. I'm like, I want to freaking wreak havoc and slaughter all of them. Yes. I don't know. Like, watching the playthrough, did you have the same kind of like emotional intensity when it came to this revenge story? Did you feel like it was unique, or did you feel like it was similar to other revenge stories you've seen?
Well, we've talked about this, right? Like the nature of video game storytelling is so different from movies in that you are the character, and that puts you in such a different emotional space. And I found myself thinking, because we were Joel through the first game, I was like, yes, my daughter, my surrogate daughter, avenge me. I was still in that headspace of like, I just died. I freaking just died, But what's great about this game, and we'll talk about this later, is that it does such a great job of transitioning your mind or your headspace from character to character. So what I mean is, I went from thinking, avenge me, my daughter, to, as you play this game, you are Ellie on this vengeance quest, right? And then, so we eventually get into her headspace. And I think the initial intent was for us to be her already at this point, but for me, I was not there yet, because I think when you're not playing the game, it takes a little bit of time to get super in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
But for sure, like by the point of her deciding and having that discussion with Maria, who's the leader of her city, and Joel's sister-in-law, basically.
Right.
Yeah. I was like, oh, let's freaking go. Like, Abby, the girl who killed Joel, you are going down, and I can't wait to spend the rest of this game getting to you and absolutely destroying you. I felt some murderous thoughts, that's for sure. I was like, At first it was like, I will be avenged, but then it became, I will avenge Joel, so.
Right.
It's good
That's
stuff.
interesting. Yeah, I didn't think of, like, you watching a playthrough, because you played the first game, so you're still Joel in your mind.
Yes.
But then, that's interesting, because I think even watching a movie or a TV show, right, it does take more time to get invested in a character. And for this game, you have just 2 hours, right, to get used to Ellie. And not even 2 hours, because a part of that, the first 2 hours, you're playing as Abby, which I thought... At that point, I was like, "What a weird choice! Like, why am I playing as Joel's killer?" And we'll find out. We'll find out later why. All right, let's talk about the next section of the game, which is Ellie in Seattle. So we find out that the group responsible for killing Joel is the Washington Liberation Front, or WLF, or the Wolves. So Ellie goes off to Seattle with Dina, her girlfriend, her lover, to exact vengeance. And throughout this journey to find the WLFs, the Wolves, I was boiling with anger towards them, man. And I feel like the game does a good job of making you hate them, right? When you actually see your first wolf, like, I don't know, man. I don't know about you, but I turned red. I was like, I want to kill that guy. It reminded me of what Neil Druckmann, the director of the game, what he said when it was first announced in 2016, that the theme of this game is hate. It's the opposite of the first game, which was love. And I'm like, dude, I understand now. Like, I understand why he said that, because all I felt was hatred, for the wolves. And each kill felt completely justified. I had no problems murdering these people. When you sneak up behind them and slit their throats, you can hear Ellie say, "Shut up," or she says, "Quiet," and then she like brings them to the ground as their throats are like bleeding out. It's very gratifying. Oh my gosh. These are the people who killed.
Has made you powerful.
Yeah. These are the people who killed Joel. You want them to pay for what they did, for killing like this beloved father figure in Ellie's life. I love how you uncover the world of Seattle through this revenge quest. It's so much bigger and expansive than the first game. It's not quite open world, but there's a lot more to see and a lot more to explore. And we find out that Seattle is unlike all the other places like Boston or Pittsburgh that you visited in Last of Us 1. The Wolves are like the Seattle version of the Fireflies, except they're stronger, and most of them, they have most of the control over the city, but there's also a religious cult called the Seraphites, or the Scars, that's battling the Wolves over the control over Seattle. And I want to hear about your thoughts on how the Seraphites are first introduced.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the Seraphites are a religious cult that basically is introduced with little hints here and there. The big hints are that the leader of this religious cult is a woman. We don't know who she is. We don't know what she did. All we see are images of her and the inscription, "You will feel her love," or "feel her love." And it's this really terrifying, unsettling, like, what are they saying?
It's really creepy, right?
Yeah, and it does conjure up images of other cultish things in our real world.
I want to hear about the first time we actually meet the Seraphites face to face, because like you said, we see murals around the city, we see images
Oh yeah.
of the cult leader and their handiwork, we see people hanging from streetlights or hanging from the ceiling with their intestines dangling out. It's terrifying.
Yes.
But when we first meet them, oh my gosh, like what was it like watching that for you?
It was terrifying because, it was also framed in the game as like a simple walk through the park because Ellie found the directions to where she was needing to go, and she's like, "Oh, just cut through the park, like no problem."
Yeah, right.
But as soon as you start passing through, the game is filled with atmosphere. So this walk through the park is like really mossy and dense and foggy because it's in Seattle, of course, after all. And then you get shot with an arrow and and you start hearing whistles around you. And apparently this is how the Seraphites, or the Scars, they have the same name. We can call them Scars from here on out. The Scars are, that's how they communicate and say, someone's there or someone's around. It's a really terrifying thing. It is like Hereditary. I see in your notes. It's like when in horror movies when you associate like a terrifying moment with sounds that people make, unnatural sounding sounds. These whistles evoke that same emotion of like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah,
and
it's almost like it almost reminds me of like a juvenile whistle, like you're whistling to like a child or something. Like that seems innocent, but they're so twisted, and they're like a killer, a murder cult.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like
so
clowns.
off-putting. Yeah.
It's like
Sorry. Yeah, what were you saying?
Oh, I was just gonna say, even the way the game subtitles the whistles is just it made my heart beat. Like it would say urgent whistle in all caps and exclamation marks. And I don't know, like it's a little minor detail, but like seeing that made me freak out even more, because it's like each whistle means something a little different, and the game kind of gives you the hints at what their intents are. And I don't know about you, but that made me chill all over just seeing that.
Yeah, man. We're definitely going to talk more about the Scars later on. But let's move on and let's talk. I want to mention one cool thing is that in Ellie's portion of the story in Seattle, you're following Tommy's trail for this entire section of the game, and I think it's very cool how you see the kind of terror that he's kind of rained down all the wolves ahead of you. And one of my favorite scenes is when Ellie and Dina discover the two dead guys in the room, and then Ellie realizes, oh shoot, this was Tommy's work, because of the method of interrogation that Joel had told Ellie about. And it's the same thing that Joel did in the first game. I'm not sure if you remember that, but when Ellie was captured by the cannibals, like Joel's torturing those two guys, and he does this very same thing, where he shows them a map and then has one guy point to the map, and then the other person has to match, or else they're both dead. So, yeah, I thought that was a really, really cool moment in this section. Like the fact that you're following Tommy, and he's you just see how skilled of a killer he is. Like he's this sweet, kind, not like country man, but the death of his brother awakened like the beast, man. And you see the kind of person that Tommy used to be. That he's never been portrayed in this way before.
Yes. We should also point out Tommy is Joel's brother. So
yeah, right.
That's he goes off on this revenge trail first. He's a few days ahead of, or maybe a day ahead of Ellie and Dina at this point.
Yeah. And it's talking a little bit more about, I guess, hatred and killing the wolves. I think there's even more satisfaction when you kill the people who are in the group responsible for Joel's death. You killed Jordan, there's Nora, Mel, and then Owen. For me, Nora's death sticks out with the red lights in the basement of the hospital. The fact that Ellie threw herself and Nora into the spore pit without masks. And then, Ellie finally... she corners Nora. And then Nora has a reaction to Ellie. She's like, "You're breathing spores," and then she's like, she pauses, and then she's like, "You're her." And that in that moment, Ellie just was so badass because like she's this. People know of her. She's like the only person in this world who's immune, and so they all know of her. She's like the legend, you know. And then she freaking just kills Nora.
Never meet your heroes. Never meet them. They'll kill you, and make you breathe spores.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, I've been talking a lot about my favorite moments in this section. Are there any other notable things that you kind of want to talk about?
Yeah, you know, there is this game confirms to me a couple things, and I didn't do as much reading up on Neil Druckmann and the storytellers as much as you have, Mike. But the scene that takes us to a flashback of the dinosaurs. There's a scene in the flashback where we see Joel and younger Ellie living life, and this is the storytelling function I suppose they do, is like each time we reach the end of one day we get a flashback scene, and that's how we get Joel into this game still, and makes us feel like we're still able to understand and see and get to know Joel more. But there's a scene where I think it's for Ellie's birthday. Joel takes her to an abandoned museum of natural history, which was really sweet. But then there's this T-Rex in the courtyard. And I love Jurassic Park, for all of you who don't know. And this was a huge moment for me because, first of all, I believe they used the same design for the T-Rex as the Jurassic Park T-Rex. So I thought that was really
interesting.
Cool.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, if it's not, it's like super, super similar. And I would hope that this was on purpose. But as they walk through the halls and you hear young Ellie talking about the dinosaurs and stuff, they mentioned that Joel used to watch this old movie about how they brought dinosaurs back to life. And I'm like, dude, I know what movie they're talking about. And there's just like a lot of cool moments there. But I think this also confirms to me, because there were so many times in the first Last of Us and in this game where they use a sense of dread and tension building and sound of something around the corner or in the shadows, like prowling, to great Spielbergian horror effect. It's like super adventure driven, but also super tense and terrifying. And I was like, dude, this guy's probably inspired by Jurassic Park in some way, or Alien, or, you know, all those movies back in the day that were kind of horrifying but also mainstream. And I think they were big Jurassic Park fans because I saw this scene. I love that.
Yeah,
part.
he also misquotes the movie, right? He says a mound of crap, but
yeah, yes.
yeah. And I think that was their way of probably getting around like copyright issues, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so
but that also makes it even more feeling. It makes it feel realistic still, like, because how many times have we misquoted movies in real life too? You know,
right.
Joel's just like us.
Yeah, and Ellie straight up asked him like, "Oh, what's the movie called?" And he's like, "Tell you what, we'll have a movie night when we get back." He doesn't even like tell her the name of the movie. I'm sure
great.
Ellie loved that movie though. Yeah, just
sure.
On the note of the flashbacks, there are other flashbacks also, but there's one where Ellie and Joel try to get to a music store while they're out on patrol, and then Ellie confronts Joel at the end of that flashback about the story that he presented her at the end of the first game, about how there are other people immune like her, and they stopped looking for a cure. Like, man, those moments are so heavy in this game. Like, you feel you want Ellie to find out, but you don't want her to find out, because if she finds out, then it's over, right? This relationship that they have is just it's gonna end. And then it broke my heart when the last flashback that you get of Joel is Ellie going to St. Mary's Hospital in Salt Lake City at the end of the hospital at the end of the first game, and she finds out the truth, and she is able to confront Joel. That was just so brutal to me because, like, she's like, tell me the truth and I'll go back to Jackson. And then he tells her, and even how he tells her, right? It's like, it's the perfect way to tell without too much. There's like very little exposition in this game, I feel like, and we talk a lot about exposition, over exposition in movies and TV shows, right? Where it's like too explicit, it's like on the nose, people don't really talk like that. I mean, Joel here, he just, in one sentence, he just says, making a cure, making a vaccine would have killed you, so I stopped them. And that's all he had to say. He didn't say I murdered all of them or whatever. Like, and then Ellie just completely loses it. And I think that was such a crushing scene because, you find out that that's how Joel died, right? Like, he died having this rift and fracture in his life, in the one relationship that he truly cares about.
Whew.
I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on those other flashback sequences?
No, I mean, you said it all. That part was devastating. I stopped dead in my tracks. I was like, is he gonna say it? Is he gonna admit it?
The game does something completely unexpected. At the climax of this part of the story, Abby finally catches up to the Jackson crew. She holds them up at gunpoint. She kills her Asian brother, and then she tells them poignantly, "We let you both live, and you wasted it." And just before she can do or say anything else, we cut to black. And then the game makes you play as Abby, Joel's killer. And not only do you play as Abby, you play her for half the game.
Yeah.
All right. Before I talk about any, because I've been talking for a while. What were your thoughts on this? Like, how did you react to this watching this?
Okay, so as a watch through, I knew that there was a lot of game left to play, and I was like, wait, no, like. And I am telling you, I fought the temptation to go ahead and see what happens right after this moment. And I didn't do it.
Good.
But the temptation was so real because I was like, oh my gosh, it's like the binge watcher's like temptation, right? It's like, I need to play the next one because I need to know what happens next. But what happens next is not what happens next. We have to play half the game as the girl we're trying to destroy. What a crazy feeling. I was like, no. And even as I was watching it through, I was like, no, I am not going to care about you. I know what you're doing, game, and I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to go along with your ruthless plan to make me start caring about the enemy. Nope, not going to happen.
Yeah, I think, I think the first thing that people were outraged about from the leaks was the fact that they killed Joel. And I think this is probably the second part that they were furious over. The fact that you have to play as Joel's killer in the second half of the game. Yeah, and I'm right there with you, man. I was like, no, I don't want to play as Abby. I hate her. She killed Joel. I want to kill her. Why am I playing as her? But then we start peeling away at who she is, right? The first Abby flashback reveals all that we need to know. Her father was the doctor who was to operate on Ellie to create a vaccine.
Boom.
And that's the first doctor that Joel kills at the end of the first game. And I remember that guy too. Like, you have the option. You don't have any other option but to kill him in the first game. If you just wait around, the Fireflies catch up to you and kill you. So you have to kill him as a doctor. So, my thoughts still, I'm like, okay, cool story, but, I don't care. I don't want to know her point of view. She killed Joel. She must die. But then, we start to see more of who Abby is and who her friends are and the WLF. Okay, they're essentially mirrors of Ellie and their town in Jackson, right? When we wake up as Abby in Seattle day one, we walk through the WLF colony, which turns out to be a football stadium, right? I mean, what did you think about this part? I remember you texting me through this. You're like, what? You're like pretty surprised, I think.
Yeah, so, I mean, the way the game frames the WLF is they're merciless killers. And rightfully so. I mean, from the perspective of Ellie, these people just were involved in murdering Joel, the man who you consider to be your father. But when we start to play as Abby and we see her return to their base camp, basically, and we find out that they have a thriving society in a football stadium, like, I was blown away by the fact that, oh my gosh, like, the game has essentially pulled the rug from under me. They've put me in the headspace of these are evil people, who only are out to destroy. And instead, we see that they have a thriving society that rivals the quaint little village that Ellie and Joel lived in. In fact, I think they've gotten further along. They have rooms and apartments where the suites for the fans used to be in the stadium. They have dogs, they have horses, they have schools, they have food. Like, it was quite stunning, and I loved it. It was really cool to see, and I just thought, wow, okay. But Abby's still evil, so I don't care. This is cool that you have your cool little city and society in maybe what used to be the Seahawks arena, but I ain't buying this. I still don't like Abby. I'm sorry. You haven't convinced me yet, game. And then,
Yeah, like, I think the first point where I was like, whoa, was when, Abby's walking around with Manny, and then they see a classroom full of children and teachers. And then you walk out onto the football field, and then there's agriculture. There's like a market. Mm-hmm. Instead of a football field, it's now like a field of crops. There's just camaraderie everywhere. There's love and there's friendship. It's one big family. Like you said, man, like, we thought the WLF were monsters, but then they're just people, just like the people in Jackson, maybe even further along, right? Because they're on a much grander scale. So the game is trying to show us, the wolves are not monsters like we thought they were. And there's even a conversation between Abby, Mel, and Manny in the beginning of this section that mirrors a conversation that Ellie and Jesse has. Basically, Abby, Mel, and Manny, they talk about how the truce between the Scars and the wolves ended when we let our guard down. But then one of them is like, no, but that was in retaliation for when we killed those kids. Mm-hmm. And then another one was like, no, but those kids attacked our guys. That's why we had to retaliate. And then Abby says, it's not our fault. It's their fault. And, Ellie and Jesse talk about something very similar. Jesse asks Ellie if she thinks that the wolves will come after them because they're killing a lot of their people in their own city. And then Ellie then says, well, they killed Joel first. And then Jesse says, well, Joel wronged them first. Mm. And this is where, one of the main points of the game is the cycle of violence, right? Yeah. That's actually one of the titles of the tracks in the soundtrack, Cycle of Violence. And I love how they portray the cycle, right? You don't even realize that you're in a cycle of violence until you start seeing Abby's perspective, right? There's cycles of violence on their side, there's cycles of violence on the Jackson side. And I just think it's a fascinating exploration that becomes more clear in Abby's part of the game, which is how the game portrays tribalism, right? In Seattle, there are two main factions, right? The WLF and the Seraphites, and then you have Ellie's small little cohort from Jackson. Mm-hmm. You have the chance to play as someone from Jackson, then you have the chance to play as someone in the WLF, and you get immersed in both worlds, and also in the world of the Seraphites later in Abby's part of the game. The more time you spend in each character's shoes, the more empathy and the more understanding you develop for that group. And you know what? Like, I actually didn't have the same kind of hatred against the wolves or even the Scars as before when I was playing as Ellie. I may not agree with some of their methods or tactics, but inside of each group there's humanity. I just feel like this is such a unique perspective that the game is able to take you through by having you control people in both groups. And how relevant is this message to our is this message for our times, right? Like, our country is so divided, it's so tribal right now that anything anyone says that opposes your point of view, they're demonized, they're labeled as idiots or they're bigots, right? Like, you support Trump, you're a Nazi. You support Bernie, you're a communist. You know, the commentary that The Last of Us Part 2 offers, it diffuses those notions of tribes, and it shows us that on every side, there are people who love, who care, people who have empathy, people who have stories, right? People are people. So I just, it's powerful. It's a very powerful way to use this medium of gameplay of video games to kind of make you feel that message. I don't know, did it end up winning your empathy for the wolves or for the scars, or did it not really work for you?
Yeah, so that sequence we were just talking about where we meet their society didn't, but it was really effective in softening me up for later in the game when we see more and more of Abby's story, about who she loves, about what she's given up for her quest for revenge, and like, it's pretty amazing. Once you get to the end of this arc or the series in Abby's shoes, you find that, you find also that, you know, she's trying to avenge someone she loves, and it's also her own father. It did win me over in the end, because I think that with storytelling, you do have to go in with some openness. And I think what you said about tribalism in our world and in our society also is true in entertainment these days, right? There's fans who are on one end of the spectrum and on the other, and there's so little room for nuance in this day and age. I think that's why this story was met with so much outrage, and we talk about stuff in other fandoms too. I mean, our podcast name is named after a Star Wars reference, and there are tons. It's such a divided fan base at the moment, because people are like, I need my story this way, or else it's this, right? And in the same way, this happens here too. And I found that when I decided during the watch through that I was going to give Abby a chance, finally, I found myself really swept away by how well engineered and crafted the story is. It's like they did a great job of transitioning our mindset really from one end to the other. And I think we just have to approach storytelling that way. There's nuance, there's right and wrong, there's death and life, there's people who are evil, there's people who are motivated by revenge and vengeance. But that's what human life is like, and our stories as humans is never simple. It's never black and white, right? I mean, we know that about ourselves. So when someone tells a story that invites you and challenges you to try to understand a different viewpoint or to try to understand your enemy, like, I would just say this is a great lesson for life. It sounds preposterous saying that about a video game, but I feel like it's such a great lesson on life and like understanding the other, quote unquote, you know, the people on the other end of the spectrum from you. And so I found that playing this game actually, you know, in our heads and in our minds, we know that our enemies are people. We know that on the other end of the spectrum, on the opposite of the battle line, we have real human beings that we're facing off against that we call our enemies, but they are people and they are human just like we are. And I think we all know that in our mind and in our heart, but I mean, we all know that in our mind, but this game I felt like was teaching me in my heart what that really means, as silly as that sounds about a video game.
Well, I don't think, that last part, video games, it's not like what it was in the 90s, right? I think it still doesn't have the same level of respect as other mediums, but I think games like this, is trying to get people to take it seriously. Like, hey, this is a serious form of storytelling, and
Yep.
yeah. So we got to stand up to that, to that point. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Like it's a message that it really makes you feel. Like it plays, like this is why we love stories, right? It imparts feelings to us, and this is the feeling that this game is trying to get us to feel, and it's a profound feeling, to finally empathize with the people that you want to kill, that you have hatred for, and how it seeks to do that through storytelling and all these mechanics and the gameplay is. I think that's why this game's a masterpiece. Like because it being able to achieve that, and I kind of want to mention, like, the two women in this game, Abby and Ellie. They're actually both on the same quest. You mentioned, Abby's father was killed, and then now Ellie's father is killed, and then they're just in this cycle of violence and quest for vengeance. But Abby's story is actually ahead of Ellie's. Right here, Abby's story begins with the act of vengeance. She kills Joel, but then she has to deal with the consequences of her revenge. She lost her true love in Owen, and her friend Mel hates her guts, thinks she's a terrible person. And I think Abby's story is fascinating because she's on a different quest now. After she's killed Joel, she's now has to prove to herself that she still has humanity within. And later on in her story, she takes in Yara and Lev, who are both Seraphites. They're scars, and she helps them.
Yeah.
And this is her path to redemption, to show that there's still some soul left in her, even though she's done everything in her power in the last 4 years. Like in the flashback, she was like a normal looking girl, but in this game, she's jacked. She's like more buff than I can ever hope to ever be in my life. So she became this machine, to kill Joel, to kill her father's killer, and now she has to deal with all the repercussions. So I love how when we see the events of Joel's death, but now from Abby's point of view, we see right when she kills Joel, she has this look on her face. It's as if killing Joel hasn't done anything to bring her father back, and nor does it do anything to fill that void. And it's kind of like a warning, right, of the path that Ellie is embarking on her journey. So that's another aspect of this story that I appreciated, so much. It's like the fact that they try to have these two stories, like George Lucas Star Wars style poetry rhyming, right, in the two stories. Yeah. I do want to talk about something that's so unique, and that's the climax of Abby's story, which it brings you to the previous point in Ellie's story, right, where they kind of show down in the theater.
Yes.
But now you're playing as Abby still. Now you have to fight Ellie, and Ellie is the final boss of this section of the game. I want to hear your thoughts, because I told you that I've never seen this done in any medium. And I know you were trying to hold your thoughts on this back. I mean, do you agree with that sentiment? Have you seen this before, or is this something that's like wholly unique to your experience in this game?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as this part happened, I knew it was the part you were talking about that you'd never seen before. Because I was just like, they are not going to make us do this. Like, I started thinking about it. I was like, if this game is taking us in the direction I think it's taking us, we're going to get back to the point where Abby and Ellie are facing off, back like 10 hours earlier in this game, to the point where Abby was holding her gun up at Ellie. And we get there, and I'm like, they are not going to make me keep playing as Abby. This is where I get off the train, right? This is it. But no, we play as Abby still, and the game is having us try to basically kill ourselves, or at least Ellie, the player we were playing for, and the one we truly have cared about. So this game was insane in that, and I felt like I almost, as tough as it is to admit, I almost was like, but Ellie kind of deserves it.
Oh wow.
But it was faint. But the point is that this game got me to that, to start thinking along those lines.
Right.
And I think that was tremendous in that moment. I was like, I cannot believe you did this to me, game. Like, I cannot believe you actually did it. And I think this was the goal, was that we would see it from the other side of things. And the pain that led Abby to that point too, And even Owen, one of the guys that we talked about, he's a good guy, even though he was on the WLF, he was actually a good, sensitive man, who wanted what was best for Abby. We even see that he kind of tried to talk her down from her revenge plot against Joel in the flashbacks. And
yeah, he's actually the one who convinced everybody not to kill Tommy and Ellie, because
that's right.
He says to Abby, if we kill them, we're no better than he was.
That's
referring
right.
to Joel. He has extremely strong moral standards. Yeah, he's.
Yeah.
I was telling my wife, he's actually my second favorite character in the game after Ellie, just because how principled he is, and how good of a heart he has.
Yeah. And he was another character I thought, oh my gosh, I am gonna hate this guy. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm,
he looked like one of those characters where you're like, oh, he's the smooth, slick villain of the story, but he wasn't. He was just a normal guy trying to survive, and a guy who loved and lost, and I just thought that was brilliant that the game brought me to that point of almost sympathizing with the girl who wants to kill Ellie, who we've spent a game and a half with.
Yeah, the playing that part of Abby trying to kill Ellie, I purposely died at first, because I'm like, all right, I guess Abby can't kill Ellie, right? So I'm just gonna die. and then it makes me start all over again. I'm like, what? I have to fight her? This is a part of the story? I seriously died 4 or 5 times. It's not a hard fight, but it's you don't want to do this. No, I just want to run away and hide from Ellie forever. But, it makes you fight her. And, oh my gosh, this game, it killed Joel. And I was convinced they could do anything. They have balls.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm like, if they kill Ellie, I don't know if I can continue. Right?
Yeah.
Thankfully, all she does is break her arm. Even then, when she broke her arm, I literally screamed. I yelled out loud.
Me too. I yelled. I was like, oh, uncalled for, but kind of called for.
Yeah. And okay, so that part where Dina comes out, and then Abby has her in a headlock with a knife to her throat. And then Ellie says, don't, please, she's pregnant. And you have this look on Abby's face, she thinks of Mel, who was pregnant, who died, who was killed by Ellie. Mm-hmm. And right at that moment, she's like, I could tell, dude, she's thinking an eye for an eye. She says, good. And she's about to slit the throat of Dina. And then Lev is the one who says, no, don't. And then Abby finally comes to her senses, and she realizes and she remembers the growth that she's experienced, the redemptive arc that she's been on, and she lets them both go. And I that was so powerful, because she almost slipped back into that frame of mind, that cycle of vengeance again, Mm-hmm. But I think that was good call, man. If Ellie died, I would have been done with the game. Okay, before we move on to the conclusion of the game, okay, so I have to mention some notable moments from this part. Okay, crossing the sky bridge that the Scars built to get to the hospital. That part was stunning. I don't know what to call it, production design or whatever. The design of the map, of the buildings, it's just gorgeous, beautiful. It almost felt like we were playing Uncharted instead of Last of Us. Fighting the super bloater in the basement of the hotel, that was absolutely terrifying, and I did not want to die because I didn't want to play that part again. And then finally, the battle on Scar Island, that whole sequence of riding the horse through the flames on Haven, and it culminates in the fight with that really buff Scar. It's just stunning, the stuff that they kind of have you experience through this game. Anyways, let's move on to the next part, which is the farm. And I mean, you were watching the playthrough, so you already knew that there was more game after this. But playing the game, I thought this was the end. I thought it all ended here. And this is what Dina and Ellie were dreaming about at the beginning of the game. They finally got what they wanted. But you know what? Even though this is a quote-unquote happy ending, I somehow felt empty inside. Like, no, there hasn't been resolution. Yes, Ellie has settled down with Dina. They're raising the baby JJ together. It's like a dream scenario, right? But I just felt so uneasy that Ellie hasn't resolved that final thread. Joel's death has to be avenged somehow. And, when we start seeing flashbacks of Joel again and Ellie has, like, PTSD, I was, like, happy. I'm like, yes! Let's get back into it! What were you thinking during this part?
I just kind of knew that it wouldn't be the end, because why would the game do this? But I felt the opposite. I was like, please just settle for this. Like, let's call it here. Like, we gotta, it's like cutting our losses, right? Like, it's a sunk cost. Like, we all have lost so much on both sides. Let's just, you have a family now. You're raising your wife, I guess now, her ex's baby. Anyway, it's a happy moment now. I wanted her to settle down. I wanted the cycle to be over. And I think I felt like I was groaning when she got a lead, when Tommy came and said, "Hey, we got a lead on Abby. She's still out there." I was with Dina in that, like, I was like, please just let it be, like, it's over. It's over. Like, you don't have to ever see her again, and you can move on with your life. And I think it was at this moment when you see Dina framed in the moonlight. They did a really great job of making her seem tragically beautiful in that moment, like, just wanting when wanting Ellie to just stay and end this violence, this cycle of violence, right? And I think there was a tragedy to it, but we also knew, okay, well, we got to go and do this final thing. And I felt that tragedy, that loss of, like, you're gonna throw all of this away to continue revenge. And I think I texted you when this scene was happening. I said, revenge is such a no-win situation, right? It'll be the end of us all. Like, if we follow that path, it'll never end. And that's how it felt here. Yeah,
I think for me, as it's interesting because you watched the playthrough, and I showed my wife like a playthrough, an edited playthrough, and you both had the same reaction. Like, you didn't want Ellie to continue. I think playing the game and just being so invested in Ellie and in her quest, to me, it felt like it's unresolved. Like, I think she to make peace with Joel, I feel like she has to make that final effort to at least try to avenge him. You know what I mean? Like, if she just let it go, for me, like, I'm like, dude, you didn't even at least try to avenge him. You just kind of let his killer go. But I mean, you can make the argument that she already tried and she failed. So, but anyways, let's get on to the final portion, Santa Barbara. And I'll be honest, when we switched back to Abby, I freaking groaned. Like, I was like, okay, yes, the game earned my empathy for Abby, but to me, this is still Ellie's story, right? Abby was kind of just tacked on. Thankfully, we switched back to Ellie shortly after, and you remain in control of Ellie till the end of the game. And so Abby gets captured by the I forgot what they're called. The Rattlers? The Rattlers.
Yeah, the Rattlers, yeah.
Yeah, these weird, it's like a biker gang in Santa Barbara. They use zombies as, like, the infected as sport, or something like that, and they have slaves. Yeah, so some kind of another twisted faction or group. And so Ellie has to fight through them because they captured Abby and in order to get to Abby. So I got to mention that the start screen for the game, basically when you boot up the game and it asks you to press a button to begin, it's this shot of a foggy water with a boat ominously floating there. And, maybe the first couple times I booted up the game, I wondered about its significance. But, you forget as you continue to play the game, right? You want to just start the game. You don't really think anything about it. At the end of the game, you follow a wounded Abby onto the beach, up a hill in the sand. And then once you go down the hill, they reveal the boat and the foggy waters. And this was beautiful. Yes. This is everything that they were hinting at. Every time you start the game, this is what they were building up to. And I just forgot about it. I'm like, oh, this is what that is. This is what that image means. And I just love how Ellie is getting into her boat, and she just has that image of Joel, his head bashed in, and then Ellie's like, I can't let you leave. I needed Ellie to at least try to avenge Joel. And I don't know. Let me know your thoughts, because I can talk about my thoughts later. I want to hear your thoughts first.
Yeah. Well, I was shocked because when we play as Abby, we actually find her get captured by the Rattlers, and we don't see her again until the end when Ellie finds her and she's strung up on a post, like emaciated, like super skinny, and her hair had been cut short. She was no longer the muscled like killer that she was, but she was like a shell, literally a shell of her former self. Even her hair was gone. And I thought, oh my goodness, like that's what happened to her. Like she became less of a human than she was. And I thought that was really poignant and was the game's last little like salvo at us and saying like, you have to understand and care about the other in this story as well, right. But then as for all my talk, okay, Mike, for all my talk of like, Ellie, just settle down and all this stuff, when she said, I don't think I can let you leave, I was like, oh, here we go. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I'm right. Like, all right, well, we've gotten this far. Like, okay, you got to finish this. You can't come all the way here. But then I thought, okay, well, maybe her whole purpose of coming was to rescue Abby. And this is how they tie the game together. Like, okay, we've graduated from revenge to like empathy for our enemy, and I thought, oh, okay, yeah. Like she came and rescued Abby from the post.'t no, this is a story about revenge at the end of it all.
So question for you, when Ellie is fighting Abby at the end, did you want Ellie to kill Abby, or did you want Ellie to let her go? Like, how did you want it to end?
I wanted Ellie to win. I wanted
by killing
Abby
Abby?
By hurting Abby. I didn't want her to end up killing her at this point.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. I respect
You're
that. Like, because I feel like that's the main point of the game, right? Like, if at this point you still want to kill Abby, I think like the game kind of failed in making you feel that empathy. I do have a friend who's like, no man, I wanted her to kill Abby. I'm so sad. I'm like, why did she let her Abby live? I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah, when you're fighting Abby at the end, like the fact that it switches back to Ellie and now it makes you fight Abby, like I didn't want to kill her. Like I just wanted Ellie to attempt at getting vengeance, but I didn't want her to actually follow through and complete that, that quest. Mm-hmm. And, we don't nearly love Abby as much as Ellie and Joel. And I don't think that's the point of the game. It's not trying to get you to love her as much as Ellie and Joel. I think the point of the game is to get you to understand who she is. Like you said, understand the other, why she did what she did. Now, as Ellie's fighting Abby, she's like a flesh and blood person. She's real to us. And she herself has learned and changed as a person since killing Joel. Man, I just love how the game plays with your feelings like this. You know, it turns the tables on you several times. And now we don't want Abby to die. We don't want Joel's killer to die. Can you believe that? Like, at the beginning of the game telling us, hey, this girl that killed Joel, you're not going to want to kill her by the end of the game. And it's like, no way, dude, she killed Joel. But, dude, like, that's why I think this game is a masterpiece. This game, what it is able to achieve emotionally to make us feel that empathy. Like, there's no way that we would have ever expected to feel this way, you know.
Right.
Man, and as Ellie's trying to drown Abby in the water, like, I'm like, no, dude, don't kill her. Please don't kill her. Like Abby's a beautiful person, you know. She's redeemed herself. Like, don't do it. And Ellie has this image of Joel sitting on his porch as she's drowning Abby. And, dude, I just welled up with tears, man. Like, because at that moment, I'm like, dude, killing Abby's not going to bring him back. And it's not going to make you feel better. You feel now what Abby felt when she killed Joel. Like, you know, this quest for vengeance is not going to solve any of the problems. And so I'm so grateful that Ellie let Abby go. And, all right, and then, you know, we cut to Ellie returning to the farm. Everything's empty. You explore the house and find out that everything is cleared out except for one room where Ellie's stuff lays. She picks up a guitar that Joel gave her, and she has one final flashback of her and Joel making amends. Dude, tell me about your thoughts on that scene, because this is like some heavy stuff.
I thought that this scene was really perfect because I actually remember this too, Mike. I texted you early on in this game and said, what the heck happened between Ellie and Joel, right? Like, what caused this rift? And we know what caused the rift. We know that she found out the truth. But at the same time, I also thought, well, what got her to the point where she was willing to forgive and also to go on this quest of vengeance for him, right? And this scene is the scene that tells us why, and it is that there's an olive branch extended, if that makes sense. It's like the weight of all of it was on this scene, and Ellie says, you know, I want to give you a chance. And he says, I'd like that very much, or something, you know?
Yeah.
And I think when he says that, I think, oh, like, it made me, I honestly spun out this, like, mini movie in my head after I saw that scene. I was like, okay, and then the next day they're going to go get breakfast and they're going to talk through some things, crack some jokes, maybe talk about a movie that Joel liked. And then the next day they're going to, you know, go on a patrol together. And then the day after that, they're going to start to, you know, care about each other in the same way again. And I just pictured in my head all the possibilities of what forgiveness could look like for them. And then I realized, like, we're not going to get there. And it's like this hole in your heart.
Yeah.
You know,
that's like, I mean,
crazy.
For Ellie, that's what Abby took away from her. It's like that, everything that you just pictured and imagined, like, that's why she's on this quest for vengeance, even though she knew what Joel did, right? Like, I don't think she wanted to hate Joel forever. And just on the cusp of his death, right? They reconciled. Yeah, so it's, gosh, yeah, super heavy.
Makes you emotional, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What a way to end.
One last thing. The final shot of the game is the guitar that Joel gave Ellie. It's she rests it there against the window and then she leaves. What did you take this to mean?
I was actually wondering about this. I think she plays it to remember him, and I took the part of with her playing the guitar one last time as her way of saying goodbye, saying this story is done. I'm gonna move on, and leaving the guitar behind wasn't like a screw you or like or even I'll come back for you later. It felt like goodbye, and it was her way to kind of bury Joel for the last time in a way.
Right.
By leaving the guitar behind in an empty house. That's what I took it as.
Yeah, like he's now in the rear view mirror. And do you think she's going to go back to Jackson? Do you think she's going to try to reconcile with Dina? Or do you think that ship has already sailed and she's going to be like a loner?
Oh, that's going to be interesting, huh? I assumed she was heading to Jackson to patch things up, but do you think there's going to be more to this story? What did you think? How'd you read it?
Yeah, I mean, I read the same as you. Like, that's her making her peace with Joel and also burying him. It's very beautiful, by the way. And I don't think she can go back to Jackson. Number one, Dina, that conversation, she basically chose Abby over Dina. She chose vengeance over her family. So I don't think Dina can recover from that. The fact that Ellie said to her face, like, that's up to you to decide. Like, that's heartbreaking stuff, man.
Yeah.
So, and then number two, freaking Tommy's in Jackson, man. Tommy's going to find out that Ellie didn't kill Abby. She went all the way down to Santa Barbara and came back empty-handed.
I guess you're right.
Yeah, so I don't think she's going back to Jackson. In my opinion, I think she's going to just go out and find a new community, or she's going to be a loner and just survive. She's certainly capable of doing that.
Wow.
And yeah. I don't know. I wonder if she's going to become like Joel, that she's suffered so much loss now in her quest for vengeance. She not only lost Joel, but she's lost Dina, and she's lost Tommy and JJ. She's lost Jesse and all of Jackson. Like, I wonder if she's going to be Joel at the beginning of the first game, where, she's like just refusing trying to stay distant.
Wow. And
not connect with anyone. Over the fear that, once you start having connections, you suffer that kind of fate.
That's depressing to think about.
I mean, like, to be honest, like, when, it showed us the farm and everything was super happy, like, I was like, this is unacceptable. Like, why is this so happy? Like, I can't accept this. And then at the end, when she goes back and it's all empty and depressing, I'm like, that's better. Like, I just feel like it's more consistent with the tone of the game, like, things don't, like, it's not one emotion, right? The game does such a good job of giving you conflicting feelings, right? The end of the first game was just like that and nailed that, right? He does something so wrong but so right for him, and he preserves this relationship, but it's like under the grounds of this false pretense, right? And I feel like this game too, you feel so sad that Joel's lost, you feel so sad that she's lost Dina, but she's kind of regained her soul in a way. And you just feel it's very bittersweet. It's a very bittersweet ending. And I feel like it has to have those conflicting emotions, because I think that's the tone of The Last of Us. And this game kind of continued that from the first game.
Fair enough. Yeah, it felt right for the tone of the movie. I mean, the tone of the game.
I mean, it's pretty much a movie.
Yeah, I know, but it made me sad for sure. I wish it wasn't so, but it fits. It makes sense to how the story goes. Whew.
All right. It's a very heavy game, lots of emotional highs and lows, but man, like, what an experience. I'm glad that you stuck it through and you watched through the entire playthrough. I don't think many people would be willing to do that, but so I appreciate you doing that, and I appreciate you also being willing to talk about it on our movie podcast.
For sure, dude. Yeah.
My hope, Job, is that when The Last of Us Part 3 comes out, whenever that is, if they make it, that hasn't been confirmed yet, but I'm pretty sure it'll happen. My hope is that you will have a PlayStation 5 and that we will be playing it together at the same time.
Yes. We'll see.
Yeah.
We will see.
I hope by then you'll have your own kids to neglect too, so I won't feel so I won't feel so guilty doing it.
You heard it here first, folks. It'll be
All
funny
right.
to kind of come back a few years from now and see if this all happened.
Yeah, totally. Thank you all for listening to this episode of the Week in Foolish Movie Podcast. If you don't have a PS4 and you don't have The Last of Us Part 2, please check it out online. It's a story for the ages, in my opinion. And I'm sure Job would back me up on that as well. Thank you, and until next time, we hope you stay safe and have a great rest of the day.